when I stood under the dome, I could just feel all of these dragons and beings just coming in, and there was this boom of energy, just like, what more can I say? Mission completed. Not quite. There was a dismantling. Anyhow, as I was sitting there, and the road just went quiet. Not a thing, right? Like I say, this is Rome. It's always busy. Not a thing. And then suddenly, this sheet of glass just literally falls out of the sky. We are all looking at each other, and the waiter's like looking at us, and he goes over and checks, and sure enough, there's this shattered glass right in the middle of the road. And it was like, yeah, that was my confirmation. Welcome to the podcast, Journeys of Deepening Trust. And it's a bit smoky in here because I've just been cleansing and smudging the space with some of the juniper that I harvest locally. And today I am going to share the next part of my Magic Road series, The Unexpected Pilgrimage. And I'm really looking forward to this bit. So let's see. It's 12:12 on the clock. And we're coming up to the spring equinox here in Scotland. So let's see how it goes. So I've left Croatia, or I'm in the process of leaving Croatia and heading towards Venice. And I just want to cover some things that are part of the threads that may be relevant. One of the things that I've been seeing, and I first saw that in Hungary, literally when I just crossed the border into Hungary, was mistletoe. Started seeing mistletoe in the trees, but it wasn't just any mistletoe, it was golden mistletoe. And it just kept showing up in these random. So I knew it was important. I know the significance of it, the sacredness of it, how special it is to the Druidic traditions, at least the traditions that are called Druidic. And then before I left Croatia, I saw this sign saying hum, and it was like, and I'm trying to remember now, but I think at the time, maybe I was humming or there was humming or something, but it was like, oh, it was a synchronicity. And I hadn't really, I thought I really need to go to this hum place. Who doesn't want to go to a village called Hum? And I hadn't realized until I got there is that Hum has been, I believe, is the smallest city in the world. Now, I could be wrong. That maybe it's the smallest town in the world, but it's this tiny, traditionally built, it's a walled, it's the size of a village. It's gorgeous, beautiful stone and paths. And again, the Croatians were out there with the food. There was lots of cherries and absolutely beautiful, and community enterprises there as well. And it was just a lovely little place. And of course, I went into this little shop, this community enterprise. And as I turned, I saw a wreath of golden mistletoe hanging on the door across the street, which might have been the pub. I'm not sure now. And so I was talking to the woman there who spoke really good English and sort of asking her, about the community enterprise and pointed out the mistletoe. And she said, oh, there's a special brandy that we make out of the mistletoe. And it's based on an old Druidic healing tradition. There were some other things there in the shop as well. So I bought some, which I was then using as offerings in various places. because of the importance of that, spreading that golden mistletoe. That, the mistletoe is considered to be parasitic, but it tends to grow on apple trees. It does grow on other trees. It's connected to the thrush. These are really, really mystical, potent energies. It kind of doesn't grow in the soil. It's an air plant, if you like, even though it's parasitic to the tree. And so there's these really sort of important, sort of beautiful associations. I still need to fully understand the parasitic, but very often these relationships are symbiotic. There's either like chaga, which isn't strictly speaking a fungi. There's a symbiotic relationship that happens for a long time. There's this kind of dance. So it's not, I wouldn't say that it's parasitic in a completely destructive sense. So yeah, so that was a beautiful thing to have happened. Literally, I mean, it was just literally on the border of Croatia, passing through Slovenia. I've been quite nervous about going through Slovenia because I paid too much attention, right, to all going across the border, and so I was all prepared. And he didn't even look at my passport. It's just like, yeah, because I think they know where I went across, that's a lot of people just go through to on their way to Italy. So I was just waved through both sides of Slovenia. And as I said previously, I had originally planned to spend a few days in Slovenia, but because of extending my Croatian trip, that didn't happen. So yeah, next stop, Venice. But before I say a bit more about that, I mentioned about the thunderstorms following me. Okay. And I spoke about the work that I did, or we did, me and the teams did in Croatia. 3 days after leaving Croatia, there was an earthquake. Now, probably not unusual in the area, but significant in its timing and enough of a magnitude, to be relevant. So that felt really like a confirmation, and then it's like, oh, we really did shift something, okay, out of the earth. So as I said, Venice was tricky. That's when my guidance was getting really confusing, and it was really putting me on an edge, but I was following it, but it was like, what's going on? Maybe I'm getting my guidance wrong, and so on and so forth. And didn't take coach, couldn't get there by boat, and in the end it was like drive. And I understand now that was to prevent interference with getting there. As I had done previously, there were some things that I had prepared ceremonially because I knew Venice was going to be important. I didn't fully know how, but I knew it was to do with the three. So I mentioned before, there was the 2, the 3, and the 1. The Vatican's the 1, Venice was the 3, the lake in Hungary was the 2. And you may see that there was, the 2 was the fire and water. Then in Croatia, we're in the fire, and now we're moving into the water. Okay. So, and bringing back as well my experience with the Merpeople and the other ocean beings as I was coming through the tunnel. So I'm just framing that, bringing that back in. So I get to Venice, you can park, you have 3 hours. Okay. So, just following my guidance, again, dragon symbolism coming up. But the energy was really like there was a kind of, I could really feel things. And I was very aware that the Merpeople were starting to come into Venice and that they were present in the canals. It was really, in fact, one, I could see him. I mean, with my third eye, but I could see him. And what was interesting with that is I had, the various things that I had prepared ceremonially, um, which I needed to place in certain places. Is I walked over this bridge and where I could see him, and he's just like, come on, hurry up. Drop my little energetic bomb or whatever in the water from the bridge. And as I did that, this woman came and stood next to me. And I could just felt from her energy, she knew she needed to be there. And when I looked over to her, she had a fairy tattoo. And I was like, yeah, you're part of my team. And this was a really beautiful thing in Venice. It's the first time I've experienced it to that extent, where I was being shown who the human parts of my team were, you know? So this woman, I felt she really was aware of something. How much she was aware of, I don't know. She knew that she needed to stand next to me and make that connection. But I saw others that were being shown to me. Some are teenagers, so they may not have been aware of why they were present, but I was being shown who they were. And it was a beautiful thing, this sort of beautiful dance. And throughout Venice, there's sort of various, I guess, guardians or guards, and there's a real uncomfortable energy about them, I'll say. And and they were keeping an eye on me. And it's like, Venice is quite big. And I could see that I was being kept an eye on. Anyhow, I had these items, ceremonial prepared items that I was depositing in the water to support the Merpeople with coming in and doing what they were doing. I think at one point we got a boat because I had Pippa with me. We got a boat over from one part to another. Again, that was part of that as well. And I was guided to go to St. Mark's, I think, is it Bastille? But there was a lot of works going on around it, and there was a big queue, and I had limited time, and I needed to get a boat back across that part at a certain time. So I was kind of just guided to walk across the courtyard in front of it and up to as far as I could to where the structures were. I can't remember what they called, to keep you out, and connecting to the sea from there. And again, I'm dropping my little bits bits of magic and bits of light as I'm going around. And what was really another the point of interest is there's one place, and maybe when we get to the Vatican, it's obviously needing the experience. And there was this sort of beautiful grid, I guess, over the water system outside these shops. It's quite a narrow little alley, but it was going off the sort of the St. Mark's area. And I was about to drop something, and one of those guards started really staring at me. And I'm like, well, I know I need to drop it in there. And he's really like conned on to me for whatever reason. I've not done anything obvious other than not join the queue to St. Mark's. And of course, it was quite simple. I had laces on my shoes, so I kind of just dropped down, went to do my laces up, and just dropped that through the grid. And that was Venice. I mean, I had ice cream and coffee is something that I remember. It's a very important part of my trip around Europe because there's different ice creams and different coffees in every single country. There's always something new. It's always done that bit differently. And yeah, and that was something that brought me a lot of joy. So yeah, I would have got ice cream. And again, I walked past what I think is like the equivalent of the town hall, and there was this big wreath of golden mistletoe outside with a flag, which was like think the Italian flag. I don't know if Venice has its own flag. So that was Venice. It was a very, very brief trip because I just literally became very aware at that point. Then it was just in and out. They wanted me in and out. And once I was there and I saw these guards and the energy of these guards, which was like unpleasant, I could see why. Um, so Venice, as I said, was about the three. So what is the three? The three is if you like, the masculine, the feminine, and the child. Okay. So it's the energy of having all three in place. So it's almost like Venice could be seen as a woman's thighs, like, and that access to her womb space. That's what I feel, which has been targeted. Yeah. So after I left Venice, I followed the coast around, and then I was guided to stop at a certain place. I only had a view of Venice from across there, and we did some work there to sort of really, because all the Merpeople were coming in to do their part, and so it was really sort of bringing in and supporting that energy of what they were doing. And as I say, there were other human parts of my team there as well, which was just a really lovely thing to experience. So next, Rome and the Vatican. So I don't remember much about the drive there right now. I'm sure again, if I go through my notes, I can. But let's fast track to Rome. I booked an Airbnb again. I probably camped on the way there. I don't think I got there in the same day. I think it's unlikely. Anyhow, get to Rome, Vatican. That's my next job. An Airbnb with air conditioning for Pippa, because I knew she wouldn't be able to come to the Vatican with me and that I would need to leave her while I was going into the Vatican. So, and again, preparing things. I'd had some amazing finds. I'm not going to detail them, but I had some amazing finds. So again, preparing things ceremonially to take with me. So this is the one. Okay. So literally before the one becomes the three, because the one, then there's masculine feminine principle, which then becomes that the divine child. Okay, so at least that's the way I understand it, but it's so in flow. That's why there's that unity. Once we kind of really that flow between the three becomes so fluid, it's like we're in the unity, which is the one. Okay, so my understanding is that the Vatican holds the teachings of Mary Magdalene. I'm not sure. It's something I've been told, but there I am. Pippa she has her walk. The next morning I get up, I've made the things that I've prepared, get the train into wherever I need to go to the Vatican. One thing I'd done was that I had booked a tour, because you could only go to the crypt or the catacombs or underneath if you went on a tour. And that again was what I was guided to do. So I booked this tour, and you're kind of given a little thing to put in your ears so you can listen to what she's saying, so you can move around and you don't need to be really close to her the whole time, which suited me. So I'd booked the tour, but before I went on, in fact, even before I got to that point, let me backtrack a bit. It's all coming back, right? So on Pippa's walk, we went and walked by the river, further up the River Tiber, which is the river that flows through that, sort of past the Vatican and then out to the sea. Okay. Now with me, my friend in the Alps had given me some sacred ashes that from an olive tree. So this is the indigenous culture coming from the Alps, the original culture coming from the Alps and being brought to Rome. Okay. And this is where I was gifted a really important component for the ceremony the next day. So I'd been to this particular walk in the evening, and then I thought, right, this is where I need to hold the ceremony before I go to the Vatican, which is what I did. So that was with the olive ashes. So that River Tiber was really important. So I knew when I was at the Vatican that I needed to make my way, which is the edges of the gates, if you like, or the edges of the city walls of the Vatican, to where the River Tiber goes past. I think I've got the name of that river right. And because there's two great angels, and I was like, okay, that brings in the angelic presence. And so that morning, from the time of doing the ceremony, even before then, the energy from the four directions was gathering. I mean, it was really strong. Strong in a different way from Venice, because Venice was very much about the water and the Merpeople, and then, literally going into the womb and recovering that space, if you like, that space where that had been siphoned. So the angels, the ceremony, okay, I brought in it was so powerful. It was palpable. You could feel them, the dragons and all the beings, the angelics. And these were warrior angelics. They're not like, it was like boom. And even as I was getting on the train and I just missed one, they were going, hurry up, because the energy was building so much. And so there were multitude of teams here. This was kind of unprecedented. I'm used to working with my own team and, maybe, but this was a gathering. So I'd gone to the River Tiber to just, again, connect that because of the olive ashes, the angels, and then just inside or outside the city walls, there was this building, which was kind of a bit derelict, and I was curious about it. And I kind of was having a poke around. I couldn't find any name for it, but somewhere I must have found something, because I remember that it was for a female saint. Okay. And I was like, that's so curious that, that again, that subjugation of the feminine. And yeah, so and being kept at the city walls. Now I appreciate that in traditions, and I mentioned that when I was talking about Serbia and doing the review on Serbia. What was interesting is later I then returned when I go back to the UK, and I returned to Plascarden, which is a Benedictine monastery. I'll link the blog post below for that. So that it would have been about a year later that I went there, just over a year later, went back, is that the nuns who previously could only stay just outside the monastery walls were now allowed to stay within the monastery. So there was still some separation between the female nuns and the male nuns, but it was like, oh, the feminine is starting to be moved, right? Moved into the space and become more included and less separated. So that was an interesting point there. Of course, I hadn't realized that. I mean, it was a year later, okay? But I thought I'd bring that in, because here we have this derelict building. And of course, at first I'm thinking that was my perspective. And then a year or so later, I'm finding this is shifting even within the Catholic Church. Though strictly speaking, the Benedictine monks, though Catholic, that's not their origins. They're older, they're more ancient. Okay. So in fact, you could say that they're Druidic. They descend from the Desert Fathers, from the Essenes, you know? So there's I'll pop those little bits for reflection in there. Okay, so I'm in the Vatican. There's these energies gathering, and I'm going around outside the I think it's St. Peter's Basilica. Okay, sort of depositing my little gifts. And then it was time to meet up to go on the tour. And so we cross over, and I mean, if you've ever been in there, the energy, I mean, again, dragons are present, keys are present, right in the middle of the Vatican. Sophia's name is present. I've said this in my post, right? It was about cathedral size, but she was still in the middle. And so the whole thing was really curious. There was blue light streaming in through the windows, and it was like, and when I stood under the dome, I could just feel all of these dragons and beings just coming in, and there was this boom of energy. It was just like, what more can I say? Mission completed. Not quite. There was a dismantling. So then we go down into, I don't know if they're catacombs or the crypt underneath. And, you know, I said I had practice in Venice, and again, I'm not supposed to take photographs there or anything. Again, there was one of these grids, mesh covers, if you like, where I was able to drop. It was so interesting. The guy who was there, the guard who was there, he kind of looked the other way, and I just did my thing, and you know, able to clear a lot of the energy that was down there and free up what needed to be freed just through, you know, doing that work, right? In the ways that we do that work. So it was a real blessing to be able to go down and do that. And it was interesting because the guide's voice, you know, was almost like had a hypnotic influence. So it kind of like I was having space held for me, and I was able to be in partial trance while I was there. And then we come out of the Vatican, and there's this big like bath with all the dragons coming off of it, and you can fill up your water out of this. Is their fountain. It's a fountain with the dragon's energy. And I did that. We handed everything back to the guide, and as we walked out onto the steps there was this massive roar, and it was a roar, and I'm thinking it was thunder, not a cloud in sight. And I was thinking maybe it's a plane. Nothing in sight. And I wasn't the only one looking around. There was lots of people looking around. We were all looking around. And then I realized that's a dragon. That's a dragon. That's like a battle cry, if you like, or that victory cry. And it was like, whoa, you know, what a blessing, right? What a blessing to be part of that work. Like I say, I didn't necessarily see my human teams in the same way I did when I was in Venice, but you know, it's obviously the right guide, the right kind of voice, you know, the right guard who looked away at the right time. And he had a nice energy about him, actually. He had, when I feel into that. So yeah, I mean, how amazing. And there's a really interesting juxtaposition of things within that kind of courtyard just outside Saint Peter's Basilica. Yeah, that are both magical and um, curious. There was one of the things is that there's like again a medicine wheel, like a compass with the four. I knew what it was, right? But you can't walk it because they have something blocking it. There's a kind of structure there, so you can't actually walk the circle. I did, right? But and I walked that 3 times. I'm trying to remember if it's around the fountains or between the fountains. Anyhow, but I did walk that circle. And when I was doing it, while I was doing it, somebody actually tried to stop me and sort of jump onto it in front of me. But I continued. It was really, really interesting, right? Of is that unwinding? Yeah. So by this point, I was hungry. And so I'm saying, come on, you know, and I was being guided to do other things. I'm like, no, I need to go and have some lunch. Let me go and have some lunch. This work is clearly being completed. And so yeah, I was guided to some place. I went, and this is Rome, okay, and the Vatican. It's really busy. But I got to one of the restaurants just about 5-minute walk away. They were full, and there was one with just about 3 people there, still seats outside. So that's where I went. Sat there, ordered my food, and as I was sitting there, um, and the road just went quiet. Not a thing, right? Like I say, this is Rome. It's always busy. Not a thing. And then suddenly, this sheet of glass just literally falls out of the sky. And we are all looking at each other. And the waiter's like looking at us. And he goes over and checks. And sure enough, there's this shattered glass right in the middle of the road. And it was like, yeah, that was my confirmation, you know. And I still feel really blessed. What an honor to be part of that work. Because I know I'm not the only one who's done work in the Vatican, whether physically being there or more remotely. And both are needed, you know. I know I'm not the only one who's done that. But to know that I'm part of that dismantling of a paradigm, or at least that layer or level of dismantling that paradigm at that point, yeah, what an honor. But it was like, yeah, whoa. Anyhow, um, at this point, because again it's hot, I'd taken to traveling overnight. So I think we actually headed off maybe that evening or early morning. I'm not sure. Obviously, you're paying for an Airbnb, you have to pay for 2 nights if you want a full day. So that's why I'm not sure. But I needed to go to the mouth of the Tiber and get to the mouth of the Tiber, to sort of complete that part of this. The rivers that come down from the Alps and then feed into the Tiber and then whatever. So we did that, and we finished that part, and then had quite a magical journey. Then kind of things got a little bit more normal, right? Didn't finish, but things started to get more normal. Like Venice and the Vatican were massive, clearly part of um, of many, many, many teams. And it was just such a blessing. There were armies, especially the Vatican. There were armies. It was a battle. No word of a lie for that. That is exactly how it felt. The Venice was a little bit more. It was more underwater focused, but just as powerful in that way, just a kind of slightly different energy, because water contains a slightly different energy. So yeah, after that, I went back up, went to Florence, didn't stay in Florence long, ended up in some beautiful places, but one of them was Assisi, um, where Francis of Assisi, and what a place, perfect place for me to be at so that I could integrate. The energy there is just so pure and gentle. Um, yeah, I went to some other places like Siena, which again is a lovely old town village. And so we were able to just um, really hang out. So I'd gone back to Italy. I'd gone back to visit my friend, and um, like I say, went to some places on my way there, on my way to visit her. So that's my friend that I ran the sweat lodge with. So that was at the beginning of the journey. So I was going back there. It felt important to return um, there. And there were some people who'd been on the sweat lodge who'd invited us to lunch. So we'd gone over there to lunch, and then we were driving past this village, and then we both saw this church, and we were like, turned around, went back to look at the church. And it was unusual in this village that there was no name to the church. We couldn't see a name for it. And we kind of went in, there was something somber about it. It was a big church. Like, I mean, if you're familiar with Roslin Chapel, it's probably about the same size as Roslin Chapel or bigger, you know? Felt, from what I can remember, it's probably stone built, but there's a lot of wood, dark wood paneling inside, and different places to light candles. And there was something really deeply reflective about being there. And it felt really important that we were there. And it was only on the way out we saw a signpost, and this is on the road outside of the village. And this church was in honor of Anna. That's Mother Mary's mother, or grandmother of Jesus, Yeshua, as she's known. And it was like, it was so, in fact, there wasn't even a statue outside, if I remember rightly. It was just so unusual. This sort of very quiet, sedate church. And yet that felt very much part of closing the cycle. And then we went to swim in a river, which again felt important because, the journeys of the rivers had been really important. The waters, if you may remember the miracles of springs coming up, the waters have been really important right from the beginning. If you remember Mother Mary asking me to to find the water, and we release that serpentine energy from the water. So the waters, and as we were swimming, we could smell somebody having a bonfire, and it was fig. So the fig smoke that was coming over, um, you know, was almost washing over us as well, and coming in and really sort of bringing that cleansing and purification. And again, this often associated with the Garden of Eden. So there were many, many things that came through for that part of the journey. And I guess I could say that that's where that closed. But what happens is that as I have some really magical experiences, and I think when we've been doing some really profound work like that, there are things that happen that are part of that show us some magical places, right? The elemental kingdoms, and we kind of really start to deeply connect with them, because that also helps with the integration and of that experience, that because it's an initiatory experience. But also we're shown the next leg of the journey too, which then I pick up in 2024. So I'd stayed at a beautiful place in Italy before I crossed over to France. And again, it was kind of like a treat to myself. It was this little house which was on a campsite which you had to walk to. There was no car access, and with this beautiful waterfall. And I'd booked this little house. It was the only house there. I just randomly found it. I wanted somewhere remote, so for 3 days. And they allowed dogs. It was probably about a half-mile walk from the parking, and oh, it was gorgeous. But while I was there, the man said, "Oh, will you water the olive trees for me? So then I don't have to come into the garden and water the olive trees." And there were 11 olive trees there. And coincidentally, I arrived the day before Mary Magdalene's feast day at this beautiful and sacred waterfall. It, you know, really, really special. And again, I've got a blog post about that I'll link below. So that kind of just brought in another dimension altogether. And so spent my few days there. And the next thing was I was going to France. I was on my way home by that point and visiting some friends on the way. And on the way there, something popped up. That's right, about the Magdalene. And suddenly, again, all of this dragon stuff, all of this Magdalene stuff started to pop up when I was in France, and nothing that's on the usual routes. Okay, I wasn't even aware that at this point that there was a whole Magdalene pilgrimage places and routes and all of that. And I still haven't been to maybe one in a couple of years, but at that point, but I was finding them everywhere, and finding key places and being guided to, one place was like a well in the middle of a field. It's like, okay. But there was one place where there is a monastery, a Benedictine monastery, in honor of Mary Magdalene. And I knew I needed to find it. And it wasn't that easy to find. I found loads of stuff. And I ended up in this beautiful part of France, and the Magdalene energy in those hills was palpable. And it might not be part of the usual pilgrimage route, but I could feel her energy there. No doubt about that. It was 3 a.m. before I found the back door of the monastery. And at that point, because I was on a limit, because I needed to get back to England, because I have a limited amount of time in Europe, I left an offering at the back door. My friend in Italy had given me 3 variations of indigenous Italian wheat. So it was like, an offering sister to sister to sister. So I left that offering, as well as a few other things there for her at the back gate to the monastic garden. So but I knew I needed to go back. At that point, I knew I needed to go back. So I think that pretty much completes 2022. There's always more, but I go back in 24 and pick up from that place. And that's the next series. This is the end of the Unexpected Pilgrimage. I've managed to do it in 4. Thank you so much for sharing this journey with me. It was completely magical, and that's why I call it the magical road, because I was in another realm. And that's one of the reasons I love this work. When we're called to do something like that, it's just like And that was my first really deep experience of that, especially for such an extended period of time, and really starting to understand how the weave really works and how multi-layered it all is. And also how that's unfolding out in the world today, because it's not a linear process. Yeah, the lineage of the roses is next. Sending you much love from my heart to yours.